Today we are going to talk about the relationship between media violence and violent behavior. With the development of technology, media gradually became an indispensable element of human social life. No doubt, media do suggest the relationship between individual and public as well as provide human a more convenient world. However, due to the lack of regulation on media content, media such like television has a negative influence on nowadays society. At the same time, a recent statistic of violent crime and behavior do attract people's attention, related to the situation that violent behavior is widespread exists in media and consider its effectiveness. The connection between media violence and real-world violence is worth deliberating. In order to comprehend this issue, three experiments related to this are represented below. First experiment was done by Bandura. In the background of his experiment, people noticed that modern technology lets children exposed to the violence on television, radio, and newspaper. Therefore, the connection between children and media violence became more and more significant. In order to explore the influence of media violence on youth and find the association between media violence and subsequent aggression or aggressive tendencies in children, Bandura did this experiment. Before the experiment, he pointed out that the violence in the media has been known to adversely affect the behavior of children and adolescents. The participants in the experiments are children and adolescents. During the experiment, those children and adolescents were divided into three groups and asked to watch a video and then describe what they saw. The main outcome are: Group 1 saw the man rewarded. Group 2 saw the incident and without reward or punishment. Group 3 saw the actor receive a verbal reprimand. After observing the finding, Bandura gave a conclusion that children and adolescents are affected by violence, but they may react differently to media violence. The limitation in these experiments is that media has a variety of forms, but the scientists only choose the television to do the experiment, and the range of the subject to observe is restricted to children and adolescents. Thus, in the further experiment, scientists should consider the influence of other media like newspaper and do the research among the adults. Now, moving to the second experiment. The reason to do this experiment is that people want to know the effect of TV violence on real criminal behavior. This experiment aimed to examine the effects of media violence on offenders and test how real criminals respond to TV violence. Two scientists argue that many individuals actually reenacted the specific violence that they had seen on the screen. The participants in this experiment is the violent offenders, non-violent offenders, and non-offenders. In the experiment, three groups of people were shown a violent video and then asked about the film immediately. However, scientists find that offenders prefer more violent films, identified more with the violent characters, and were more excited by the violence than non-offenders, and the non-violent offenders show little difference in how they react to film violence, but the violent offenders were more likely to prefer violent films. Scientists draw a conclusion that watching violence in the home is a considerable effect on the likelihood that an individual would behave violently. The experience then will lead them to prefer violent media and to be influenced by it. The limitation in this experiment is seen to the first one. Scientists only concentrate on the effect on TV but neglect the other media such as video and newspaper. Now, moving to the third experiment. In the background of this experiment, a common public view is that exposure to violence videos results in extreme violence, but the direct relationship is not so clear. For this reason, the experiment was presented. Gill adopted the same structured interviews to compare the effectiveness of exposure to violence. The participants in these experiments is 20 male patients in a high hospital with a history of schizophrenia and violent behavior, 20 men with schizophrenia and no violent history, and 20 men with neither schizophrenia nor a violent history. People were asked to give a response to scream violence and identify the characters. However, scientists find that men with a history of mental illness and violence experienced a significantly greater emotional response than men with mental illness but without a violent history, and men with neither mental illness nor a violent history. Gill concluded that men with schizophrenia and a violent history had a great preference to viewing violence than the true control conditions. The first limitation is that the study used the same structured interview, which might have led to a basis when interpretation by others. In the further experiment, the methodological problems must be taken into account. What's more, the researched a small sample of 20 men in each of the three conditions. In other words, caution must be taken when concluding these findings. Overall, those three experiments above help us to research the relationship between media violence and real-world violent behavior in three different aspects. The first experiments done by Bandura give us a clear evidence that media violence do affect juveniles' violent behavior. However, the research target should not only be children and adolescents. Therefore, the second experiment chosen the adult as its experiment subject. Borney and Penny used the findings on the experiments to describe the connection between media violence and the violence crime. The outcome of the experiment supported the view that media violence can really increase individuals' likeliness to display violent behavior. Nevertheless, those two experiments have a common limitation. Both of them did not consider other interference factors which may lead to an experimental error. To solve this problem, the sixth experiment took the schizophrenia as its interference factor. The results better proven the view that, besides other factors, the relationship between media violence and people's behavior is clear. Now, back to our main question. Thanks to the three experiments, we can answer the question that exposed to the media violence do increase an individual's likelihood of engaging in violent behavior.